cut ruthlessly on the stuff that doesn't enhance their life satisfaction, and to recognize that some of the things that they think enhances their life satisfaction actually doesn't. That's what Daniel Kahneman used to call reflective happiness versus experiential happiness. So reflective happiness is what you think happens, or a justification of something, which you believe to be true. The experiential happiness is the actual reality.
Welcome to the Teacher Money Show, the podcast dedicated to helping teachers navigate your unique financial challenges and unlock your financial superpowers. I'm your host, Sean Morgan, a full-time teacher. That's right, I teach every day just like you, and personal financial coach. And I'm here to help every teacher, whether you're a seasoned teacher looking for fresh insights or a new educator navigating your first paycheck, to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life.
The contents of this podcast are informational in nature and are not legal or tax advice, and neither I nor my guests are engaged in the provision of legal, tax, or any other advice. You should not act upon this information without first seeking appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional.
I'm super excited to have Andrew Hallam on the show today. Andrew is an international teacher, or was an international teacher, is an international speaker, and the author of The Millionaire Teacher. He's just a wealth of knowledge when it comes to making wealth as a teacher. I'm super excited to talk to him today. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate it.
Hey, so you were a teacher, and I'd really love to hear about how people were in education, got interested in finance, and that whole journey. So what was your journey in education, and how did you get interested in personal finance?
Well, I started out as a public school teacher in Canada, and I came from a family where we didn't have a lot of money, so I had to pay for everything myself. I mean, extra things that I would have wanted, say, from the age of 12, which I think puts you in a financial sweet spot. Like at the time, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate to this, where, you know, if you were a kid and other kids around you got new bicycles and you got like secondhand bicycles, or you had to buy your own bikes. That's kind of where it was for me. My dad was a mechanic. There were 4 kids. And so from the age of 12, I could deliver newspapers, I could babysit. And so I was kind of expected to do that. And because there wasn't a lot of money going around, if I wanted a bicycle, 12 years old, I had to save up the money for it. If I wanted a new pair of soccer boots, I had to save up the money for it. And it's funny, Sean, because I've been interviewed before, like on radios and such, and I've said to people, they've asked me, so what's your background? Like, what was your family life like? And I start by saying that I grew up in a privileged household. And I did. I think I really grew up in a real sweet spot. And I think when people hear privilege, they think wealthy. They think of a family. I came from a family of means. Coming from a family of means actually makes it more difficult for someone to acquire financial wealth or to be efficient with their money. It also is really difficult if you're really poor. So, like Malcolm Gladwell talks about that inverted U concept. So too much on one side is a challenge, too much on the other side, but then there's that sweet spot right up at the top. So I grew up in that sweet spot where, there was enough money for us to have decent food. We had decent shelter. We felt safe. It was, it could be a bit of a rough community, but not too crazy, not dangerous. So, I mean, it was just a perfect environment to build just enough adversity to make us, I think, stronger. And then to recognize that, money didn't grow on trees, literally. It wasn't like my parents could afford to give us money for college education or anything like that. So, we had to pay for that ourselves. And it was like a summer job that I had when I was going to university, that I met a mechanic who was a self-made millionaire. And then the guy was financially literate. And he said to me, he goes, look, you want to be a teacher. Teachers don't make a heck of a lot of money. But here's the deal. If you become financially literate, you could end up with far more financial wealth than people earning 2 and 3 times the amount of money that you earn. And so he was the one that taught me about compound interest. I didn't learn about it in school. He was the one that convinced me that I should be investing my money. So I started doing that from age 19 and never really stopped. So, when we talk about, like, again, another Malcolm Gladwell book, when he talks about outliers, this was my outlier moment where I'd met somebody who inspired me at a really young age. That's what got me going. And so, yeah, I was training to be a teacher, but what I also ended up doing was I just got so interested in the idea of having my money work for me. And then I think once a teacher, always a teacher, in that, there's that part of us that wants to share and wants to help. And so for me, to finding that avenue is with writing. So I started my career really concurrently with, like a freelance writing career. And so I was writing for Money Sense magazine. I was writing for Canada's national newspaper, the Globe and Mail. And eventually, as you mentioned, I ended up writing a personal finance book called Millionaire Teacher, which which I was really, really fortunate uh, with, because it ended up hitting number one in the United States for every business and investment category at the time for the first edition, which was super exciting. Not that you make money from books. That's the funny thing. Like if you're like me and just super excited to get like the first contract, what a publisher will do is they'll give you a book contract that they don't expect anybody to sign. It's like the worst contract ever. They're like, I'll call it the idiot contract. So what they do is they test first time authors with the idiot contract. And I was just so excited that that I signed it right away. It kind of reminds me of there's a Seinfeld episode where like Kramer, he ends up, I don't know, he spills coffee on himself and he gets a burn. He decides that he's going to sue like McDonald's or whatever the fast food restaurant was. And you've got this scene where the lawyers are all talking and they're like, okay, when Mr. Kramer comes in, what we're going to offer him is we're going to offer him like $3 million. And so there's a scene. Yeah, that's what we'll do. That's about all we can do. We'll see what he does. So Kramer walks in and the first thing they do is they say, okay, Mr. Kramer, we're going to offer you free coffee for life. And he goes, I'll take it. That was me signing this contract. So yeah, it was quite funny. I think I got like 83 cents per copy for a book that sold for like $22.95. And then, ended up being at the time, the best selling finance book in the United States on Amazon during that point in time. So anyway, that was kind of an exciting thing and quite a humorous one too. A learning experience for me.
Yes, a learning experience indeed. Man, yeah, Seinfeld's got some brilliant moments, and you can learn some good things from that as well. Man, yeah, I love how your journey in personal finance actually started before your journey in education, because I feel like it's so much easier to make the right decisions first before you've made some dumb decisions, and then you have to recorrect, like just the process of correcting back after making some dumb decisions, or not even dumb decisions, just uninformed decisions, can be really, really difficult. So that is quite the blessing. We have, you're a teacher, a millionaire teacher, and that's something that a lot of people go, millionaire teacher, isn't that an oxymoron? Right? That's just not something that a lot of people connect as being possible in their mind. What makes it possible for a teacher to become a millionaire, even though it's not something that most people think about?
Well, I mean, a big part is you got two factors here. One is really understanding how powerful compound interest can be. So just, I mean, having the fortitude to put away $6 a day and investing that in a portfolio of index funds for your entire working career, that's going to give you $1 million. So that's going to give you, you're going to be able to retire on something that little. So it's, if you have a lengthy enough career and you start really young, like I did, but it's compounding that really works its magic. I'm gonna have to test that too. When I say $6 a day, we're gonna have to see if that actually is the number. So it's $6 a day. You've got, what's that? 6 times 30. That's $180 a month. And then so let's say you start at 20 and then you go to age 65. So you've basically got like 45-year period. We'll run that through a compound interest calculator just to see if I'm actually right on that. But the point here is that if you start early, you don't have to invest anywhere near as much as a lot of other people do. There's the other element of, and it's so common, it's the keeping up with the Joneses component of things. And it's the importance of ensuring that you track what you spend and you track what you earn. And a business that doesn't do that goes broke. But for some reason, we operate in this weird vacuum where we don't necessarily focus on tracking what we've spent and categorizing that, and then evaluating it and looking at it and seeing if those expenses actually align with our value system. And often they don't. Like, you'll track your expenses for a couple of months and then you'll see, well, look at how much I'm spending on XYZ. There will be something there. I guarantee that everybody will go, you know what? That's a lot of money to be spending on that. And I don't get a heck of a lot out of that. So I'm not going to spend as much on that. I think too, Sean, another thing is that we establish norms based on what we see around us. And norms aren't exactly healthy, especially lately. We will want the same things that people around us have. We'll want the same kinds of cars. We'll want to take the same types of trips as everybody else. And so you can have people in your income bracket living a certain way that I won't say it's unsustainable, but it's not necessarily productive. And so what some of your listeners might do is they might say, oh, listen to this guy. He's like, promoting a really cheap, frugal lifestyle. But the important part is that, yeah, frugality is important, but how we spend our money in terms of how it aligns with our life satisfaction is even more important. So looking at, what does behavioral evidence say about spending, and where does spending actually enhance life satisfaction? So I've never had a new car, for example. Like, a car is a massive depreciating asset. I can afford a new car, but I've never had one. A lot of teachers buy new cars. And quite frankly, for the most part, that's a huge waste of money, because there's a massive depreciation that occurs when you take that car off the lot. And so, trying to find, it's almost like an education in itself, but trying to find like a 10-year-old car with low mileage that's in really good shape. That's one of the things that we should all try to strive for, finding like that older vehicle, because there are plenty of them and you can get a lot of life out of them. And if you get them that have low mileage, you can end up with very few problems associated with them. When it comes to buying a new car, it's like a sugar fix. You'll feel excited about it at first. You take it off the lot, or you're taking on a test drive, you take it off the lot, you're going to be excited about it. Or maybe you're leasing a car, which I think is even worse. That's money that's really tossed down the toilet, flushed down the toilet. You get a sugar fix from driving one of these, a new vehicle, but it doesn't take long before it's just a tool that gets you from point A to point B. It's an expensive, depreciating tool that does not enhance your life satisfaction. So, it's these things that I love to look at like behavioral science as it reflects to life satisfaction, and cutting ruthlessly on the things that don't enhance our life satisfaction, and then spending on the things that do. So, for example, like experiences. When you're years from now sitting around a campfire, you're not going to talk about the things you bought back in 2025. You're just not. You're going to talk about the fun things that you did with your friends and with your family, the experiences that you had. And so when we think about that, it's much the same on our deathbed. What are the things we regret? Well, we regret spending time with people. We regret saying sorry. We regret, not loving as much as we should. We might regret not sharing as much as we should. We never regret not buying stuff. That's never a point. We never regret not, we don't like, oh, I regret. I sure wish I made more money. I sure wish I bought more stuff. Sure wish I bought that car back in 2036. And we never regret that stuff. And that's where true wisdom, I think, comes into play, is when you're recognizing your mortality and then aligning it both with your values and then what behavioral psychology suggests actually does give us enhanced levels of life satisfaction.
I love that. Cutting ruthlessly the things that don't bring us satisfaction is huge. I mean, I know many teachers who spend an absurd amount on eating out or on I mean, I had one teacher who I did not see drink anything but Diet Coke for 6 months straight. Like just the amount of outlay that it takes to do that is a lot. And if we can, and I don't know, maybe she gets intense life satisfaction out of drinking Diet Coke every day for 4 or 5 cans. But the whole idea is that if there's just so many things that we're spending money on that we might not actually need. Now, as a quick side note, if you put $180 a month in for a 40-year career at 10% return on investment, you will be just $50,000-ish shy of $1 million, which is not bad, right? And $6 a day is what you said. So I mean, there's some of those months that have an extra day in them, right? You might get over the line there with $1 million at $6 a day for a full 40-year career. But naturally, you'll be able to do more than that. You won't be doing $180 a month, 10 years in, 20 years into that career. So just that's a good place to start for sure. I love that. And the fact that you just pulled that number out of nowhere and it happened to be like almost right on the money is fantastic.
Maybe from now on, I should say $7 a day and then I'm safe.
Oh yeah, $7 a day. You could probably even get away with that and have a slightly lower return on investment too. And that's perfect.
Probably could.
So we have this problem though, where we actually do have teachers becoming millionaires, but people still don't believe it. So like the National National Study of Millionaires by Dave Ramsey puts teachers in the top 5 professions to be millionaires, but people still think teachers can't become wealthy. Why do you think that there's that disparity there, even though teachers are actually becoming wealthy at a high enough rate to be in that top 5 profession group?
Oh, yeah, it's kind of funny. In one sense, that statistic is quite misleading, only in that if you think about the most common profession, it's actually educators. So I've seen that where educators are, in terms of profession, among the top 5 professionals that become millionaires. But we have far more educators than we have lawyers, doctors, you name it, optometrists. So it's a little bit fooled by numbers there, but what's pretty important though is to recognize the fact that there are teachers that are millionaires. So this is possible. So now let's come back to that question of yours, like how and why. And that's an interesting point. I think teachers can be, for several reasons, wired nicely to be efficient with their money. I know that when Thomas Stanley looked at, so he was the author of The Millionaire Next Door, and he studied wealthy people from 1973 until his untimely death in a car crash in 2015. And his daughter, Sarah Stanley, follows, continuing his research. He found, interestingly, that when adult children were given money by their parents as, quote, help, help buy a car, help for down payment on a home, help for whatever, cash gifts. We called it economic outpatient care. And when he broke down the professions, so he looked at more than 30 professions. He looked at attorneys, he looked at physicians, he looked at basically electricians. He went through every profession, or at least 30 of them. And he looked at those that had received economic outpatient care versus those that had not. So attorneys who had received economic outpatient care, meaning money from mom and dad as adults, versus those that hadn't. Accountants, those that had received money from parents as help, those that hadn't. What he found was that in every single profession, those who had received financial help from mom and dad ended up with less money when they were older as a result of that help. So it's not help, it weakens them, it makes them weak. There was only one profession that bucked the trend: educators. Now, we don't really know why. Thomas Stanley didn't know why. There are several possibilities. One could be that in many states, educators are paid 10 times a year. They're not paid over the summer. So there's an element of budgeting that's required for that. So there's that as a possibility. Second is potentially high level of education relative to low level of pay. So there's an overall awareness that they're not paid as well as some other professions, but overall they tend to be pretty sharp people. So they tend to be a little bit more careful with their money. If you're an educator, and I've heard many educators say this, well, you know how bad teachers are with money. No, actually, statistically, they're not. Statistically, we're not bad with money. Yeah, plenty of us might be, but overall, as a profession, we tend to arguably be the most efficient profession with our financial resources.
That's really cool. Yeah, I hadn't realized that teachers were the most efficient, but it makes sense because when you have less to work with, that just automatically means that you're going to have to be better with it because there's just no other alternative, right? You have to be creative with it. You have to, find the right way to, cover all your expenses when you have, limited funds. So there's that scrappy element of it, kind of what you were talking about when you were younger, how you didn't have the funds coming in from parents to, buy a bike or whatever. So you had to figure it out. You had to make what you had stretch more and get the funds needed to do it. And I think that there's much power in having to be creative with your finances. When you don't have to be creative, when you're not required to make the money yourself or to figure out the right way to spend the money yourself. It's much easier to just say, well, it's not my money, or there'll be more later because you're not the one that's actually putting in the work and the effort to get it, or the one putting in the work and the effort to direct it in a way that, like, well, it has to stretch this far. And I think that there's definitely power in that. Now, since we're on this topic of teacher salaries, do you feel like the low teacher salaries? I mean, there's some places where teachers get paid quite good, and I feel like people in those areas are still in this "we're not paid well enough" mentality, even though they're actually getting compensated relatively well. But some teachers are definitely in the lower range, and it's pretty sad the pay they're getting. Do you feel like index fund investing is enough for those who are in that lower bracket, or do they need to invest in something else, or do they need to have a side job? Is it possible to have enough invested when you have these lower salaries?
Yeah, it is so dependent, isn't it? So are they actually getting a defined benefit pension as well? Because those can be gold. So, does your school district offer guaranteed monthly payouts upon after a certain number of years of service? That's an element that is often overlooked. Then, of course, there's Social Security. Sometimes teachers will get both Social Security and a defined benefit pension scheme. When it comes to a portfolio of index funds, in terms of peer-reviewed academic data, that as far as investing is concerned, that is and does provide you with the highest probabilities of investment success. Now, if you choose to take on some kind of side gig, side hustle, you're working in the summer, this is just extra money that you could use to augment that investment portfolio over time, which then, of course, juices the probabilities that you're going to have even more money. So it's pretty sweet if you can end up with, I mean, not everybody's going to get a pension, but if you have a pension or Social Security plus this investment portfolio from which you can draw from when you're older, or take a sabbatical. I mean, that's the lovely thing too about life too here, Sean. Like, we don't know how long we're going to live. And the idea of people figuring that there's this, golden goose at the end of the rainbow when suddenly they're no longer working and then they can really enjoy themselves and do whatever. The reality is that there's no guarantee that any of us are going to see age 60 or 70 or 80. And so, like, having an awareness of that is super important. So living your life as if you could die next year. And it's interesting, Sean, when I ask people that question, I'll say, hey, would you do anything different if you knew that you might be dead next year? And it's really funny, how many people actually tell me that they would do something different. And then I say, listen to my words really carefully. If you knew that you might be dead next year, well, that's me and that's you. That's everybody who's listening to this. And that's the thing that we have to really be cognizant of. So it's living for the day. Yeah. Putting behavioral science behind our purchases so that we get the most bang for our buck today, but also having an eye on tomorrow, just in case we are lucky enough to live a really long time. I think that balance is a true key to success in this case.
Yeah, that sweet spot, right? And you were talking about that ruthless cutting earlier. That's really what it comes down to is cutting out those things that don't matter, but make sure that you're not also cutting out with it the things that do, right? And that was a bit of a leading question. Obviously, index funds are the way to go for investing, and it just depends on how much money you can put aside and how much money you're going to need in retirement. And I love how you brought up the pension, because if you're going to have a robust pension, then you can kind of subtract that from your retirement number, because if you need $6,000 a month to survive and your pension is going to pay you $4,000, you don't need to get the whole $6,000 in index funds. You can get just the 2, or maybe a little bit more if you're really needing the cushion. But there is less needed for retirement when you have that pension on hand. And I actually would wonder if that National Millionaire study would change, if teachers would maybe go higher up on the list if we included the pension, like compared to how much it is in money. Like, and it's not a perfect connection, but like if I take, I'm making $4,000 a month in my pension, and apply the 4% rule to it. So multiply that by 25. How does that compare to a portfolio, right? That's a $1 million portfolio right there, if you are bringing in $4,000 a month in your pension. So the question is, how many teachers would that bump up into the millionaire status, because they have an asset that's basically worth $1 million right there? And it'd be quite a few, because pensions are, we think, oh man, they're only giving us $35,000, $40,000 or whatever a year in retirement. That's nowhere near as much as I was making as a teacher, but compared to someone who can withdraw 4% from their portfolio, it is quite similar to $1 million. So that's something that I think is quite interesting there. So
if we're measuring power of cash flow, any career teacher with a defined benefit pension is an automatic millionaire when they retire. So you could be living next door to, somebody like an optometrist, and they might be earning a lot more than you, and you might be contributing to a defined benefit pension. And so, especially if you've got a spouse and you're both contributing to it, that optometrist, although they may look like they're living large, they may look like, you may know that they earn a lot more money than you. When they retire, that optometrist is going to need, let's say it's in money in an investment portfolio, they're going to need, $2 million in an investment portfolio just to equate to what perhaps you and a partner would be getting from a defined benefit pension. And it could be even more than that. They might even need more than that. 3, it all depends on the district that you're in. If you're in Colorado State, for example, or you're in Pennsylvania, and you and your partner are working full-time, contributing to a defined benefit pension, or Alaska, that optometrist, they're going to need $4 million in an investment account to give them the cash flow that you'd be getting from a defined benefit pension. So you're 100% bang on there. They're so underrated and so overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I don't want anyone to think, oh, I have to, stay in teaching forever just because of, this pension. I really get squeamish when I hear people say, like, well, I gotta stick it out, for 5 more years because of my pension. Like, yeah, but you shouldn't be teaching for 5 more years. There's some people that are in that so that's the only thing that bothers me about the pension. But man, if you're loving teaching and you're just growing in it, that pension is so powerful, just to have that guaranteed for life payment coming in, because that portfolio is not guaranteed for life. They could blow it, or there could be a major downturn, and following the 4% rule, it's supposed to only guarantee it for 30 years, while the pension is until you die. So and sometimes even for your spouse after you die. So it's really super duper powerful when you think about that. Do you, when you were putting money in index funds, were you using tax advantaged accounts to grow that money? And does that make it harder for you to use it now, or were you just putting it in brokerage? How are you setting that money aside?
Yeah, tax advantage accounts is really important. I mean, any opportunity that you have to put it into a tax advantaged account, or an account where you can end up getting free money, like matches, you've got to take advantage of that. You can't say no to free money. And then investing outside that, once you've filled up that contribution room it's imperative. It's really important. I was just thinking, Sean, of your point before. If you are, you're getting a little bit tired. We've all seen educators who they're sticking it out for the pension. They're not helping themselves and they're not helping the kids. They're just like, I just got 4 more years. That could be any of us. I mean, when we start our careers, we don't know how it's going to be for us going forward. We don't know how our enthusiasm might wane. And the idea that if you actually do end up building up financial resources with, say, an investment portfolio, and let's say you do have a pension that is on the horizon that you are going to be able to acquire, or you are going to be able to get cash flow from. One of the great things about having money outside of that pension is to say, you know what? If someone's really not enjoying their job, they're not a service to themselves, they're not a service to the kids, they could quit 5 years before the said pension date, which defers the pension, which for them, if they don't take the pension right away, even if they qualify. So let's say they're 55 years old, they would qualify, but they want to stick it out to 60 to get X amount per month of more money. At age 55, what they could do is they could quit. Then they could start drawing down an investment portfolio, which would be like a bridge. And then they could defer the pension until age 60. And at which point their monthly cash flow would be far higher than it would be if they started taking that pension at age 55. It's much like Social Security. If you can afford to defer it, you should defer it. So most people that live to age 62 who are actually healthy, if you live to 62 and you're actually healthy, statistically, you're set to, statistically, on average, live well into your mid 80s. And now, okay, we know what median life expectancy is, and we know that median life expectancy isn't quite into mid 80s. However, it's different when you're looking at median life expectancy from birth versus median life expectancy for healthy 62-year-olds. If you hit age 62 years of age, statistically speaking, you should be reaching at least mid 80s. And so then the idea that at age 62, if you can afford not to take your Social Security and you can defer it, you'll actually end up with a higher amount of lifetime income from Social Security by deferring it to, say, age 67.
Wow. Yeah. And those are the things to think about. And I love how you talked about how that's the importance of investing outside of your pension because of that ability to step away. My two main goals are to allow teachers to teach as long as they want. So if you have the financial acumen to know how to handle your limited income, you won't get burned out by your low income, and you'll be able to teach as long as you want and not leave for a different profession, but also to end as soon as you're done, right? And I think that's having that financial understanding so that way you can put money aside for retirement is really the key that allows you to do that for sure. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Well, we are coming down to the end of our time here. Just have a few more questions for you. We've covered these things so well, but the last question I have before I get into my final two is, what are mistakes that are keeping teachers from becoming millionaires?
I think spending too much and not tracking their expenses. Those are big ones. Believing that material acquisitions enhance life satisfaction. Believing that a coffee every day, especially something like picking up coffee on the run. I know that there's a lot of people that give flack to the idea of, I think David Bach called it like the latte factor. And a lot of people laugh at that. And they say, yeah, well, cut costs on the big things and not necessarily the small things. And while that's true, I love like reverse engineering this whole thing and looking at like, okay, again, back to life satisfaction. In 2022, I wrote a book called Balance. And in Balance, I was looking at, okay, where do we spend our money that enhances life satisfaction and where is it a total waste? Where it's a total waste is, let's say, coffee on the run. So a lot of teachers are going to stop by Starbucks on the way to work, grab a coffee, and then going to drive to work with it. A total waste of money. So here's why. So generally speaking, if you're enjoying a cup of coffee and you're sitting down with friends or you're sitting on a park on your own or you're outside a cafe, just chilling, enjoying it, you're going to enjoy high quality coffee. But you can just as easily make high quality coffee at home, put it in a thermos and drive to work with that. while you're drinking coffee on the run, while on the way to work, you're not enjoying it. You're not enjoying it the way you would if you were sitting outside that coffee shop. So when you look at the price of coffee these days, and people are going through drive-through Starbucks and picking up the coffee as they go, we're talking about a lot of money, Sean. When we're adding tips and such, just that coffee, how much could that cost people? It could be $8-9 a day. Yeah.
Could be enough to fund your $7 a day to become a millionaire over the course of a career.
Exactly. And okay, granted, if it gives you life satisfaction, awesome, then do it. But the research suggests it doesn't. So you'd be far better off. It might cost you 50 cents. You can make a high quality coffee at home. You put it in a thermos. You drive to work with that. So, I mean, this is just one example over a career, over an entire career. That's, if that's not $1 million decision, that's a $500,000 decision. So again, comes down to these trade-offs, but not only just a trade-off, you're not really missing out on anything to put that extra money away, to save that extra money, because it doesn't, according to behavioral finance, it doesn't actually enhance your life satisfaction if you're distracted and if you're on the way to work. Another thing too, Sean, when you talked about friends going out for dinner, spending too much. If we continue to do something with so much regularity that it's no longer a treat, research suggests that we do not get as much satisfaction out of it. So if you and I went out to a Michelin 3-star restaurant every single night, for us, it would no longer be a treat. Even if we did that like every Friday, eventually it just becomes like the meal out on the Friday. It's not a treat. And so, when we look at research on that, I know it's common sense. You shouldn't need research on that, but behavioral psychologists have done that where they've given people a piece of chocolate every single day. They just don't like that piece of chocolate. I mean, okay, they like the piece of chocolate, but it's like not as welcome as if they got this little piece of chocolate, once every couple of weeks. So they've done research on this and it makes a lot of sense. And I think too, when it comes down to, again, what are these things that stop teachers from becoming financially independent or in a good financial position? Because granted, not everybody listening to this has got a defined benefit pension. I know that. I think only about 40% of states actually have decent defined benefit pensions these days. So, they've got defined contributions, but not the old fashioned defined benefit pension. So for them, it's even more important that they've got to look effectively, treat their household like a business, track what they're spending, cut ruthlessly on the stuff that doesn't enhance their life satisfaction, and to recognize that some of the things that they think enhances their life satisfaction actually doesn't. That's what Daniel Kahneman used to call reflective happiness versus experiential happiness. So reflective happiness is what you think happens, or a justification of something, which you believe to be true. The experiential happiness is the actual reality.
All right, that is great. Thank you for sharing that. I love this idea of choosing, this is very specifically what you're spending money on, and buying a coffee a day is a $500,000 decision. That is something that should be sticking with everyone who finds himself doing that. It's a $500,000 decision. Okay, I got 2 more questions for you, Andrew. My first question is, what is your number 1 tip for teachers to have a richer wallet, classroom, and life?
I would say sleep more, lower screen time, spend more time with friends and family. I think by doing that and focusing on the more times with friends and family versus looking for satisfaction coming from retail therapy, where there really is no satisfaction that comes from that, I think that's key.
I love that. And, I'm just becoming convinced more and more that screen time is wrecking us as people. And it's hard because they're everywhere and all the time. And you always, need, like I teach online. I'm on a screen all day for that reason. But it's just like, man, I feel like we got to do something else. So I love that you're not just sticking with the wallet part, but the better, richer life. All right, Andrew, if a teacher wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way to do that?
Probably these days on LinkedIn. I seem to be using that more than anything else. So Andrew Hallam at LinkedIn. it's probably one of the best places that you can find me.
All right, awesome. Well, we'll definitely link to that in the show notes. If you want to find the show notes, you can go to teachermoneyshow.com/podcast, or you can go to the description in your podcast player and find the show notes there directly to this episode. I'll link to top takeaways from Andrew, as well as some resources that we mentioned here, and of course, how you can contact him with LinkedIn. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a ton of fun.
My pleasure. Thank you, Sean.
That was a ton of fun. I loved talking to Andrew today. Thank you so much, Andrew, for coming on the show. Now it's time for the Cliff Notes. The Cliff Notes today are brought to you by me. If you are interested in becoming a millionaire teacher and you would like to know how you can work through your budget, work through your finances, work through the psychology of money to be able to achieve that, then let's have a conversation. You can go to teachermoneyshow.com/coaching, and you can either come on the podcast and we can have a conversation, or we can talk one-on-one. I look forward to talking to you there. Now on to the Cliff Notes. Cliff Notes number 1. $6 a day for a 40-year career will make you a almost millionaire. We revised it to more like 7, right? But the idea here is if you are putting away just a small amount of money, $180 a month, so let's round that up to $200 a month for a 40-year career will guarantee being a millionaire, assuming that, we don't have a total crash and everything just goes away, right? We have that stock market is going up and to the right. Historically, we expect it to continue to at about a 10% per year clip. So just that small amount, $200 a month for a 40-year career will get you there. Fantastic piece of advice. The way you get that is by cutting ruthlessly on things that don't increase your life satisfaction. That's number 2, right? Don't just spend money on things just to spend money. If it doesn't bring your life satisfaction, cut it. We brought this idea up again and again and again. So don't forget that you need to be focusing on your life satisfaction and why you are doing things when you're making those purchases. Number 3, intentionally choose what you spend money on. So we're not only cutting things that we don't want, but we are choosing things that we do want. He's talked about if you're sitting around a campfire, you're not going to say, oh, if only I had bought that car. No, it's like, oh man, if only I had gone on that trip, if only I had spent that time with people. So spend money on time with people. That is what's going to be super powerful. That's what's going to make the most difference for your satisfaction. So make sure you're spending on those things. Number 4, your pension is a very powerful vehicle if you have one. It is equivalent to $1 million, or with 2 teachers, $2 million, most likely. So just keep in mind that that is not something to just be spurned as being, worthless or just like a pittance given to teachers. It is actually quite significant. And if we can use that correctly, then we can have that backstop, that backdrop on our life that will protect us, when we retire, if something else goes wrong, because it's guaranteed income for life. But then we can also have the money outside of that. So that way, if we want the pension, but we're done teaching, we can step away. Because number 5, burnout can happen to any of us. So be very careful to avoid burnout. But if you can't, have that money to be able to step away, so that way you are not continuing even after you're no longer serving yourself or the students. Number 6, remember to track your spending, because we spend too much if we don't. And then number 7 goes along with that, which is buying a daily coffee on your way to work is a $500,000 decision. So make sure you're tracking that and knowing how much money is coming in and going out and where that's going out. So that way you can then cut those things to have life satisfaction. And then number 8, his final tip. I love this. Sleep more, have less screen time, have more time with friends and family. These things are going to give a happier, better, more fulfilling life. I highly recommend that you follow his advice. And remember, as a teacher, you are already rich. Your wallet just needs to catch up. Are you worried you won't have enough money to retire? Or maybe you just don't know how you're going to get out of all of this debt. Whatever your situation is, I can help you. Go to teachermoneyshow.com/guest and fill out the form there, and you can come on the show for free coaching, or we can meet one-on-one to discuss your needs. I look forward to talking to you.